Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for coming. We are here today to honor Adele Standil, to celebrate her life, her character, her family, and the impact she has had on the people who knew her and the people who loved her. We are here to honor her and to say goodbye. We extend our heartfelt condolences to her family, her brother, Percy Goldberg, her brother-in-law, Jerry Littman, her children, Linda and her husband, Andrew, Alan, Arthur and his wife, Sherry, Fred and his wife, Carol, to her grandchildren, David, Daniel and his wife, Mako, Aaron, Brian, and Macy, and her great-grandchildren, Nova and Tara. In the Jewish tradition, saying goodbye is one of the highest forms of respect we can show someone. The sages, the masters of our tradition, call it Gemilut Chesed Shel Emet, an act of genuine loving kindness, which we do without any hope of reward, to accompany our loved one to her final resting place. And so we begin our service today with a psalm, Psalm 23, linking Adele's life with 3,000 years of Jewish tradition, with the people of Israel, and with the eternity of God. Mizmor LeDavid, Adonai roi lo echsar, Bino deshe yarbitzeini al mei menuchot, Yenahaleni nafshi yeshoveh, Yancheni v'magle tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit samavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shivtecha umishantecha hema yenachamuni. Taroch levanai. Shulchan neged sorerai, Dishanta Vashem en roshi kosi rivaya. Achtov vachesed yirdefuni ko yemei chayai. Veshavti Beveit Adonai leorech yami. Adonai, God is my shepherd, I shall not want. He makes me lie down in green pastures. He leads me beside the still waters and restores my soul. He guides me on the right path, for that is his nature. Though I walk in the valley of the shadow of death, I fear no harm, for you are with me. Your rod and your staff, they comfort me. You prepare a banquet for me in the presence of my foes. You anoint my head with oil, my cup overflows. Surely goodness and loving kindness shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of Adonai, the house of God, forever. Adele Standil passed away Sunday evening, the 6th of January, which on the Hebrew calendar is the first day of the month of Shvat in the year 5779. She was 91 years old. Many of you know the last few years of Adele's life were difficult, challenging, plagued with health problems and the emotional turmoil that often comes with them, especially for her loved ones, her children and her grandchildren. It has been painful, at times even exhausting and frustrating. Our sages say death is better than a life of pain, and eternal rest is better than constant sorrow. We are all destined to die. We share it with all who ever lived, with all who ever will be. We're discouraged from seeking to understand what's too difficult for us, or searching for what is hidden, or becoming preoccupied with what lies beyond. Death always has been surrounded by mystery, by unknowing. We can ask, why? But our question will never be answered. It just can't be. Our few days in eternity are really just a drop of water in the sea, or a grain of sand on the shore. The good things in life, health, wealth, even life itself, last but for a short time. But a good name, a good reputation endures forever as a blessing. A few years of difficulty will not overshadow the tremendous life Adele Standil led. Her accomplishments, her wisdom, her legacy, and her love for family and friends and for life. She was born November 5th, 1927. Of course, back then she was Adele Goldberg, the fourth child and youngest of Morris and Flossie Goldberg, joining her older brothers Percy and Stanley and sister Eileen to round out their family. Officially, she was Adelaide Goldberg, but her family called her Adele, or by her Jewish name, Hodel, and occasionally the diminutive form of that name, a nickname, Udel. Hodel, by the way, comes from Yiddish and means majesty. Adele was born in Winnipeg because that was the big city with the hospital, but until the age of 12, she grew up in Altona. Her family, one of only 2 Jewish families in Altona at the time. Her father, Morris, an immigrant from Poland, had moved to Canada at the age of just 21 and ended up in southern Manitoba, where he owned and operated Altona's general store. His wife, Flossie Cohen, was from nearby Winkler. They lived in Altona where they raised their kids, 4 kids born between 1921 and 27. In 1939, the Goldberg family relocated to Winnipeg and moved into a house backing onto the Red River in Elmwood on Glenwood Crescent. Elmwood, not traditionally thought of as a particularly Jewish area, but it actually was. There were a number of Jewish families who lived nearby. And, somewhat amazingly, in recent years, even as her health failed and her memory often let her down, Adele could still navigate her family perfectly from her home in River Heights all the way back to Elmwood. And as they would drive by, she could point house by house, recalling the Jewish families who lived in each one. The Landers there, the Winograds in that house. Her childhood in Altona and her early years in Winnipeg left a tremendous impact on Adele, and she was quite proud of her heritage, her parents, and her upbringing. She was 12 at the time of the move, a bright child, possibly even precocious. She later entered the University of Manitoba at age 16, a fact of which she was quite proud, and obtained a Bachelor of Arts. But before that, she went to St. John's Tech, where so many Jewish students from the North End went to high school. But it wasn't her original high school. It wasn't the one in her neighborhood. She started off somewhere else, but then transferred to St. John's after complaining to teachers and administrators that she just wasn't being challenged academically. She needed to be pushed, and that could only happen at St. John's. It wasn't exactly the whole truth. The truth was, she wanted to go to a school with more Jewish kids. She wanted a Jewish high school. Because Judaism always played a prominent role in Adele's life. As you'll hear later from her family, she cherished her memories of learning with a Hebrew tutor her father hired and brought out to Altona when she and her siblings were young. She kept a kosher home throughout her life. She ensured that all three of her sons had bar mitzvahs at Herzliya Synagogue, an Orthodox shul. And she always maintained a profound relationship with Israel, visiting on a few occasions and making sure she was always up to date on Israeli politics and current affairs. For Adele, there was no gray area when it came to Judaism in her life. She was certain of her identity, her beliefs. Her Jewishness was deeply ingrained. She graduated from university, as we said, with a BA, and as you'll hear, began a career in business as a store owner, ladies' fashion. But a turning point came in 1949, a blind date with a fellow named Sidney Standil, who had just returned from studying and getting his master's at Queen's. He was back in Winnipeg to work on his PhD. A blind date, a Hadassah dance. 6 months later, they were married. And then came their kids, quickly. Linda, Alan, Arthur, Fred. They started in an apartment on Osborne Village, then a house on Niagara and Fleet, and finally to a house on Campbell Street, where Adele has lived until this day. 59 years in the same house in River Heights. She never went back into women's fashion or business, not really, choosing instead to invest her time in her family, in her home, in supporting Sid, raising her 4 kids, dominating the kitchen. The Standil house was legendary, I'm told, for its food. The daughters-in-law and son-in-law have fond memories of their first visits. The grace, the extravagance of the meals, the preparation, the quantity, and the quality. And the junk food, the baked goods, the nothings, the moon cookies, baked goods everywhere, all the time. A good house to visit. Adele Standil was steadfast, independently minded, opinionated, but always informed, always well-read. At times, she could even be forceful. She was brilliant, a good reader, a great writer. Her kids actually remember many letters she would write them and send them throughout her life. Education was paramount. She committed herself to a life of learning. Albert Einstein once said, "Wisdom is not a product of schooling, but of the lifelong attempt to acquire it." Nothing could be more true of Adele. She was always learning, always expanding her already worldly horizons. And she was devoted to her children, to her extended family, cousins, other relatives, never missing a birthday or important date, to her friends, whom she loved to host and socialize with, to her husband of 66 years, Sid. Adele was supportive. Her children always felt she was in their corner. And in spite of a complete resistance to all things technology, she really was quite modern in her approach to many things in life, often progressive, forward-thinking. Again, we're dealing with a woman here who is independently minded. She also, I'm told, didn't like to make a big deal about herself. No fanfare. She was humble. She let her actions do the talking. She probably would say, "I've gone on too long." And I'm remiss to say I didn't really know her, though I wish very much I had. And so I'd like to call up some people who did know her and knew her quite well and loved her, to share more stories and add more color to the picture of Adele Standil's life. Let's begin with her son, Fred, speaking on behalf of his siblings.
Where do you start with speaking about our mom? She'll always be a compass for her children and her extended family, along with numerous people she touched throughout her life. Her no-nonsense values were rooted in her Altona upbringing. About Altona, she wrote, and I quote, "I could enjoy the freedom and safety in a small town where everyone knew everyone else." Dedication. Our mama always made it clear what a wonderful childhood she had, and in turn, she gave the same to us. She was dedicated to her family above all. Whether it was traditional Friday night dinners or planning umpteen social events, she was clearly the quarterback within the household. She was a devoted wife to our father for 66 years. Despite her own health challenges, she went to visit him almost every day in his final year at the Shaftesbury. Mum was also dedicated as a daughter, an aunt, a grandmother, a great-grandmother, relative to her family, and to all of her friends, a dedication. This consistently included marking, as the rabbi said, not only birthdays, anniversaries within her immediate family, but those of the extended family. Going off script for a moment here, she knew when things were happening, and she made sure we all knew it too. We've been so touched to receive many wonderful memories from our cousins and their children. Example, from my mom's great-nephew, Bryant Parker. Auntie Adele was a terrific great-aunt to me and my siblings. I truly only have fond memories of her, mostly spending time in Winnipeg and at Falcon Lake with her and Uncle Sid. More recently, she helped me assemble the Cohen-Goldberg family tree. She was truly a sweet woman. She made me feel good. She had a shining smile. I loved her. Blessed are we to have her memory. From her great niece-in-law, if you can follow that, Diane Spivak. Your mom was such a forceful presence that it's hard to believe she's gone. When I first came into the family, she made a real effort to get to know me, and she always took the time at family gatherings to catch up with me, ask me about the kids, and dispense wisdom in a manner that would make me smile. One of the many funny and true things she told me was about babies. Quote, "You can't wait until they wake up," she said, "and then you can't wait until they go back to sleep." Judaism. This was clearly very significant to her. We were all educated in Jewish heritage, Hebrew school. She always stressed the importance of the family identity, Jewish education, and the duty to support worthwhile causes. She got her own early Jewish education, again, as the rabbi alluded to, from a tutor her father hired to come to Altona to teach her and her siblings. Stories of Noah Whitman have prevailed at family dinners ever since. Education. Without question, her recognition of the value of education permeated her entire life. When they coined the term lifelong learning, she must have been in the room somewhere. She entered the Faculty of Arts, September 44, at the age of 16. She was most drawn to English, history, and political science. Speaking for myself, I know where my affinity for those areas comes from. Later in life, she continued to take university courses, participate in book groups, attend lectures, and just be out there. Any instructor had to be on his or her toes because she was an educated student. In the early 80s, she and my sister-in-law, Shari, took a course called Law for the Layperson. At one point, the instructor made a point that did not sound right to her. As the sister of a lawyer, she already knew a thing or two. Shari says Mom piped up and very politely questioned the instructor on his statement, which he quickly corrected. Teaching, she also enjoyed sharing the gift of learning with others. After the war, she helped Jewish refugees learn English at the YMHA, And in more recent times, i.e. our lifetime, she would volunteer literally outside the back door at William Osler School, teaching newcomers to learn English. Writing. She enjoyed writing, and she was very proud of her short journalistic career. Again, I can draw a link personally. She had articles published in both the Winnipeg Citizen, a newspaper of the time, and the more commonly known Winnipeg Free Press. Business. After graduation from university, she realized her dream of getting into the business world when she operated a small women's clothing store at the corner of Sherbrooke and Ellis. She clearly enjoyed running Adele's ladies' wear, and it fulfilled her goal of a real-world challenge. The turning point. It wasn't long, though, before fate took her in a different direction. She met a young physicist on a blind date. 6 months after meeting, they were married, and not long after, her career came to a crashing halt with the arrival of her first child, Linda. She never lost her knack for selling. Later in life, she returned to retail by working in Sherry's store. Her opinions were her own. Of this, we are certain. She could certainly hold her own in any discussion. In our household as we grew up, both she and Dad put an emphasis on current events, politics, and, of course, Israel. She could often be found with her red radio, which I believe she won, tuned to the CBC, or tuning in to the nightly news on television. That was a religious experience in our household. I stayed in that house longer than my siblings, and I'm telling you, not a day went by without multiple newscasts. She loved her cottage at Falcon Lake. Mornings on the porch with the newspaper and a cup of coffee were a familiar ritual, her idea of paradise. Heaven help any of us who took part of the newspaper without her explicit consent. When she wasn't at the cottage, she loved to be on the back porch on Campbell Street. She was very close with her siblings and siblings-in-law. Last night there was a recollection of how she started most of her days calling her sister and her sister-in-laws, sisters-in-law, if you will, just to check in, just to find out what was going on. I know I was in the room. I heard her end of the calls. She was a patron of the arts. She loved MTC and the ballet. I know she supported them on an ongoing basis. And at another time, she went with my dad to the Tony Awards in New York. She kept McNally Robinson in business. She was always reading what was current, always kept the conversation going. Not a lot of dead air, not a lot of pauses. Her children. She was unconditionally supportive of her children. We're all different, with our own issues and needs, but our parents always got us through it. For example, when one of her children, who shall remain nameless, was 14, he enjoyed sneaking one of the family cars out for a spin on a relatively regular basis. When the police came to the house one day to inform her, she was adamant that no son of hers would do such a thing. "Not my Alan," she said. She was a creature of routine. Dinner was at 6, not 6:05. Lunch was at noon. Breakfast was coffee, a piece of toast, and an orange. And I can tell you that persisted pretty much until now. Gotta have oranges for her. Mom and Dad had the good fortune of maintaining their health and independence well into their 80s. But as things got harder, we were lucky to find a wonderful team of caregivers. Adele's angels, who helped our mother in her final years. Special thanks to Lisa, Gwen, Daphne, Marietta, Sandra, and Madonna for helping to make it possible for Mom to stay in the place she loved the most, her own home. Again, as the rabbi alluded to, I want to reiterate this because I distinctly recall conversations with her. Our mom was not one to seek the spotlight. Frankly, she wouldn't think much of us getting up to talk about her here. But I hope and believe she'll forgive us for sharing just a smattering of the memories that have been swirling through our heads these past couple days. It broke our hearts to see her illness steal so many of the things from her that had given her life meaning. These stories and the many others we've shared and will share in the days to come help bring her back into focus. We all love you forever, and we'll never forget you. May you always rest in peace.
Thank you, Fred. Very well said. The relationship a grandparent has with grandchildren is special. Someone I know recently became a grandfather, and he just told me the other day, 0 responsibility, all of the fun. And so a grandchild's perspective is something very special, and each grandchild's perspective is unique. We're lucky to have 2 grandchildren, 2 of Adele's grandchildren, who have said they would like to speak and share some of their own stories about their Baba. First, I'd like to call up Aaron.
Okay. Adele Standil, Baba, our Baba. You were there for all of us, and you will continue to be there for us, because we are all a part of you. You have given so much life and so much love to all of us here. You knew the importance of family and good values, and not one day passed where you didn't remind us of that. Your stories always revolved around family, the love you had for your siblings, your parents, your kids, us grandchildren, your great-grandchildren, and so importantly, your husband. You will forever be imprinted in us. You had so much compassion, so much interest, and whenever we would talk, I knew you were listening. The way you cared for others is something I admire. You always asked questions and wanted to know the whole story. You also usually had an opinion on that story, but that's what made you our Baba. When I asked my brothers what reminds you of Baba, they had different answers, but we all have very individual memories of you. We shared summers at Falcon Lake. We shared breakfasts, which always consisted of grapefruit and a newspaper. We would sit in your living room or your veranda. You would listen to the radio, as Fred said. The radio that never left your side. The radio that we dared not to change the station. You loved current events, you loved the arts, and you tried every day to enrich our lives and open our minds to new things. When anyone came to your house on Campbell, whether they were hungry or not, they were fed. Your kitchen table was a place of gathering, and you made sure everyone got a fresh meal. You always seemed to focus on other people's needs and other people's stomachs. Whether it was your cooking, your reading, or even your driving, you did it your way, and that was very important to you. Baba, you and I shared a lot. You had an eye for good things. You loved a good outfit. You made sure your hair was always done, and you never left the house without lipstick. You were a woman of so many wonders. And I thought, and I still think, how did she do it? You made everything look so easy. My favorite part about you, the part that I take with me every day, you were never afraid to speak your mind. You shared your opinion in every conversation, and you made sure everyone heard you, and you didn't care who agreed with you. Conversations turned to debates, which turned to storytelling. Everything came full circle with you, and I held on to every word. You never showed sorrow. You never let anyone feel bad for you. You were a proud woman. You were proud of your family, your learnings, and your surroundings. When our Zeta passed away, I remember looking at you in the cemetery. You were sitting in your walker, surrounded by your children. You showed no fear. You embodied so much strength at such a hard time. When we should have all been there to support you, I felt like you supported us. Let us all take a piece of you with us in life. Let us take your wisdom, your love, your calmness, and your compassion. We will miss you forever and forget you never. Love you, Baba.
That was so nice. Very beautiful, Aaron. Thank you. And I know Ryan has some words that he would like to share as well. Ryan, please come up. There's water too. Okay.
Hi, everyone. Fortunately, I've never had to give one of these before, so please bear with me. It could be a struggle, but I know Matthew's here to support me. Baba, we already miss you. Since Zeta passed away 2.5 years ago, from yesterday, I've tried to call you every afternoon in case you were feeling lonely. And as your caregivers can attest, I really haven't missed too many of those afternoons. But I certainly missed talking to you on Monday afternoon and yesterday afternoon. And I will again this afternoon. You were a rock. You showed me the way. You described everything that came into your view as being either great or terrible. So rarely anything in between. And you always had conviction in your choice of great or terrible. The traffic on Grant was terrible, and Linda, Alan, my dad, and Fred were actually great. Altona was great, and technology was terrible. Your ability to tell it like it is had an effect on your grandchildren that you never fully realized. In our minds, it meant that when you gave us a compliment, it must have been sincere. If there's one word I could use to describe my Baba, it would be dependable. She was always there. She always answered the phone within 1 or 2 rings, and she always took as much pleasure in her grandchildren's accomplishments as we did. Above all, we could depend on our Baba to be waiting at the airport. Whenever we flew into Winnipeg, she was always standing at the bottom of that long escalator, beaming. It's hard to believe you're gone. I would give anything for one more of your bone-crushing hugs. As a kid, I never understood why you tried to break my ribs every time I visited you, but I wish you could do it once more. My Baba and Zeta were married in 1950, so based on the stories I've heard, I assume that they met in 1949. And Matthew, thank you for confirming that earlier. My Baba told me that at the end of their first date, my Zeta dropped her off at home, and as he walked away, she realized he was special. They went on to have 66 wedding anniversaries, And for their sake, I'm glad they're back together. During the final year of my Zeta's life, he lived at the Shaftesbury, and we all decided that it was better for my Baba to remain on Campbell. For 12 months, at age 88, she made an incredible effort to go visit him. Despite her ailing health, there were only a few days throughout the entire year that she didn't make it to see him. Then something strange happened. As my Baba's memory faltered, my Zeta passed away, and she had no idea. Don't get me wrong, she was at the funeral and at the Shiva, but she believed until her last days that he was alive and well. When I FaceTimed her, she would say, without hesitation, that Sid was taking a nap or out buying groceries. And at the end of our calls, she would even ask me to phone again in an hour or two so that my grandfather could have an opportunity to speak with me. As my Baba's life drew to a close, as it's been documented today, she suffered from dementia, but at least it had that one silver lining. And just to be clear about what I'm trying to communicate, at the time my Zeta passed away, it wasn't as if my Baba's memory was already so far gone that we would have expected her not to understand the situation. In my opinion, quite the contrary. When you consider the cognitive capabilities that she still had, it was quite a surprise. For example, she still had a strong idea of who was who in the family. And to give you a second example, her language skills were unbelievable. Then, and even up until a month ago, actually, she could beat most of us in this room in a spelling bee. And I'm not exaggerating when I say that I would ask her to edit important business emails of mine, and I routinely implemented her suggestions. Thank you all for coming here today. Your support means a great deal to our family. As everyone knows, Winnipeg produces the best people, and my pals from Winnipeg were the first to offer their condolences, even though I moved away 22 years ago. If you traveled here from out of town, we cannot thank you enough, and that's mostly my dad's first cousins. We received the sad news about my Baba on Sunday night. We had thought she had a few weeks or even possibly a few months left, so we were a bit shocked and more than a bit saddened. But far beyond that, we are happy. We are happy that Adele had 91 great years. Not only did she live a life that anybody would be lucky to enjoy, but she lived it her way. In 1960, she built a big bungalow. We would ask her, "Why didn't you build a 2-story house?" And she would say, "Because I'm staying in that house for the rest of my life, and I don't know if I'll be able to go up and down a staircase when I get old." Smart lady. She was in the house until Sunday morning. We had so many great times in that house. I say times rather than memories because to me it's not about individual moments that stick out. We spent so many days together on Campbell that it would be impossible for any individual memories to shine above everything else. To me, it was about the day in, day out of visiting my grandparents. Them sitting in their massive armchairs, either reading the Globe in silence or watching the CBC on volume 50. Or all of us just chatting. I loved sharing those days with them. Nothing ever changed on Campbell Street, Nothing ever changed on Campbell Street. And I think that's what you want when you visit your grandparents. They always had their same 2 places at the kitchen table, even if no one else was dining. And they always had an 18-month supply of Diet Pepsi. I could go on and on. Going out together was fun too. In particular, my Baba loved McDonald's. The 2 of us had so many trips to the Big M for white ice cream cones and whatever other junk we felt like eating. Despite her age and her memory loss, she would spring to life for those car rides. As I drove her down the back lane, I would look to my right to find her lathering on the lipstick. Not sure who she was trying to impress. And even funnier was at the end of our meals, McDonald's, when she would dig into her purse and pull out a piece of gum. "You want one?" she would ask. gum. I need to diarize the biggest items in my life, or else I'll forget to do them. And this woman, who sometimes had no idea if we were in the city or at the lake, always remembered her gum. Once again, we are happy. My dad and his siblings are a logical bunch. They believe, and I agree, that 91 years is more than we could have asked for. I'm happy that I got to enjoy 29 of them. In the last little while, my Baba lost a lot of her energy, and we believe she is in a better place now. I have a few closing remarks in no particular order. Number 1. This is for my Baba's friends. There were multiple times recently where my Baba wanted to touch base with a close friend, usually one of the Ruths or Mrs. Manishin, and she just didn't have the mental strength to pick up the phone. I really want you to know that she valued your friendship as much as you did. She just couldn't show it. Number 2, when my Zeta was at the end, he asked me to keep on coming to Winnipeg to visit my Baba, and I did. Over the last 2.5 years, I've played in the Friday afternoon hockey game at River Heights so many times that Marty Vine recently asked if I'd move back to town. Number 3, my parents always use the line that you get out of life what you put into it. I realized the truth of this statement when my Baba's memory began to escape her. Well, there were so many big things she couldn't remember anymore. I would say that 3/4 of the time, she could remember little things pertaining to me. She could usually recall my middle name, and she knew what I did for a living. On November 16th, I got a text message from her caregiver, Lisa, which said, quote, "When you called here earlier today, your Baba said that Ryan is a nice boy and he phones me all the time." Lisa, thanks for the great job you did. My mom made the right choice in hiring you. One day, I was walking through a Jewish center and I read a sign on the wall that said, "The test of a person's character is how they behave when no one's watching." My parents, Macy, and I believe that Lisa showed the same devotion to Adele, whether or not we were there to spy on her. Number 4, because of something else that I had going on yesterday, together with the sudden news of my Baba's passing, I have had no time to write this eulogy or prepare for it, and I was on 0 sleep when I put it together. I apologize for the rambling. To be honest, I don't even like the concept of eulogies because I don't think you can convey the essence of a person's life in words. And if you really want to know how great my Baba was, then please disregard everything I've said so far. She was 1,000,000 times better than that. Between great and terrible, she was great. Finally, number 5, to my family, I have 0 regrets about the way we looked after Baba in these last few years. She had a caregiver with her 24/7 and a family member assigned to visit her every single day from either Winnipeg or Toronto. Hopefully you will be comforted in knowing that we gave it our all. Personally, I know that I made enough phone calls and took enough flights. When my dad turned 50, my Baba and Zeta met us in Phoenix, where my Baba attended her first and last NBA game. We watched the Toronto Raptors tangle with Steve Nash and the Phoenix Suns. Another iconic basketball player whose career I followed closely, was Kobe Bryant. He was the most passionate athlete I've ever seen. And amazingly, when he played his last game, which I watched on Campbell Street, of course, with my pal Jaden, he scored 60 points, and then he walked off the court to retire with no sadness. None. In a post-game interview, he was asked how this could be. He said, I gave everything I possibly could to the game. That's why I'm so comfortable walking away. There's no stone left unturned. I left it all here. Close quote. I feel the same way. No second thoughts. My Baba was tough as nails. She was an incredible example of how to keep your emotions in check, unlike yours truly. I never saw her cry, even though there were sad moments. She spoke with great admiration of her mother, Baba Flossie, who died, I believe, when Baba Adele was in her early 30s. Not checking any of these facts was something that I kind of took priority in writing this speech. But my grandmother never cried when she told these tales about her mother. And likewise, she would take me to visit her sister, Auntie Eileen, who had Alzheimer's. But she would never cry on those visits either. She only cried once in front of me. It was the day my family moved to Toronto. She said she hated goodbyes, and obviously so do I. So now it's my turn to cry. Thank you for bearing with me through that speech.
Ryan, and as well Aaron and Fred, I have to commend all of you on your speaking. Heartfelt, powerful, and so special for a woman who was so devoted to family, to have her family praise her like that. I don't think anyone could ask for anything more. And I want to thank all of you again for coming, for Adele and for her family, for joining your hearts together with theirs. I would ask you to rise at this time for the El Malei Rachamim, the memorial prayer. El Malei Rachamim, Shochein B'Meromim, Ametzei Menucha Nechona, Tachat Kanfei Shechina, B'malot Kedoshim Uteorim, Kizoar Arakia Mazhirim, Et Nishmat Hodo Ban Moshe Freda She'alcha le'olama Began Eden te menuchata Anabal harachamim Hastirea beseter knafecha leolamim Utzeror bitzeror achaim enishmata Adonai hu nachalata V'tanuach b'shalom Hamishkava V'nomar Amen. Exalted, compassionate God, grant infinite rest in your sheltering presence among the holy and the pure to the soul of Hodel Bat Moshe Ufreda, to the soul of Adele, daughter of Morris and Flossie, who has gone to her eternal home. Merciful One, we ask that our loved one find perfect peace in your eternal embrace. May her soul be bound up in the bond of life. May she rest in peace. And let us say, Amen. Please be seated. In a moment, we'll conclude this part of the service. I'll ask family and pallbearers to leave the chapel first in a moment and make their way to their transportation and to the casket in the lobby. When the back doors of the sanctuary are open, that is everyone else's cue to go. We ask that you form 2 rows in the lobby and onto the steps of the front entrance of the sanctuary. This is a long-standing custom at Shared Zedek, forming a community of family and friends through which the casket passes. Again, a sign of respect and our commitment to surround and support Adele on her final journey. We'll make our way to the cemetery, Shared Zedek Cemetery, 230 Armstrong Avenue. We'll be driving in caravan fashion with our 4-way flashers on, but we will be stopping for red lights. As we make our journey up Sherbrooke to Logan, over to Salter, over the bridge, and up to Armstrong on Salter. Everyone is, of course, encouraged and invited to join us at the cemetery for interment. After our visit to the cemetery, we will return here to Shared Zedek for a meal of consolation. That's when our thoughts shift from honoring and respecting Adele to comforting her family, her loved ones, who are left behind to grieve her and to mourn. The family will be observing Shiva at Adele's home, 772 Campbell Street, for a week, beginning this evening from 7 to 9, tomorrow, Thursday, from 2 to 4 in the afternoon and 7 to 9 in the evening, Friday from 2 to 4 in the afternoon, Sunday, 2 to 4 in the afternoon and 7 to 9 in the evening, and concluding Monday, 7 to 9 in the evening. For all evening visits to Shiva, there will be prayers at 7 p.m. And please note that for this evening and for tonight only, there is a parking ban on Campbell Street, which could cause some complications, but that's for tonight only. To the family, we offer these words. Hamakom yinachem etchem betoch she'ar avelei Tzion v'Yerushalayim. May you be consoled and comforted. May God console and comfort you among all those who have ever mourned throughout the Jewish community. Family and pallbearers, you may now exit the chapel. To everyone else, again, I say thank you for coming. We'll see you at the cemetery, or if you prefer to wait here for us to return, we should be back in about an hour and a half round trip. Thank you again, everyone.